Thank you everybody for being here, both in person and virtually. My name is Nathan Wolek. I am the professor of digital arts and music technology at Stetson University in DeLand, Florida, where some of you who are here in person were just over at our campus earlier in the week, taking in the panel talk. I'm very happy to be here talking to you about some lessons that have been developed as part of our Young Sound Seekers project, which I'll talk more about in a minute. And those lessons, when you're working with students, are really important, right? When students are first learning to talk about sounds, students benefit from structured listening activities. They need to practice newly introduced vocabulary. They need to better understand, it helps them better understand unfamiliar concepts and helps them focus their attention on specific events within the soundscape. And early advocates of soundscape studies actually incorporated pedagogy in these, their publications, right? So we benefit from a lot of the publications like Robin's project, but also publications from our Schafer and early advocates for acoustic ecology and soundscape studies. Today in academia we call this scholarship of teaching and learning, and there's an increasing body of work about that. But there's a lot of self-publication going on and self-sharing at conferences like this, but we could all benefit from kind of gathering some of these lessons together and pursuing publications. I actually messaged Robin about that, basically, that we should talk basically about maybe a group effort to kind of collect some of these lessons and pursue kind of a collective publication. Rather than all these little disparate small solo projects, right? But this talk is kind of in that tradition, basically, of sharing activities and looking at re-examining it through an accessibility lens. So some of these early lessons, such as what we have here. So this is on the screen. I have a picture of the cover of Ear Cleaning by R. Schafer, which one can find online in various outlets from 1967. It's an example of journaling while listening. And I'll read a little bit of the quote that I have on the screen here. So, as the students enter the class, Schafer stands at the door motionless with a pile of paper in his hands and a sign pinned to his jacket reading, "Take paper, write down the sounds you hear." The students enter taking paper and record the sounds within and outside the room. So looking at this with as a good example of introductory listening skills, but through an accessibility lens, there's a problem here where students are entering the room who might be blind or visually impaired, actually seeing the sign pinned to Schafer, actually expecting them to sit down and journal with a pen and paper rather than through accessible methods that they might use for journaling and recording their thoughts. Also looking at sound walking through Hildegard Westerkamp, a key component that is kind of baked into sound walking is this idea that we need to be quiet and that we need to, as we see here on the slide, trying to move without making any sound. That's what the quote says here on the screen. Is it possible? And Westerkamp talks about how nice it is to be in an environment where you can hear your own sounds, basically, but through an accessible lens of looking at blind and partially sighted individuals, sound is embedded and part of the walking experience, basically clicking and tapping of canes, also talking to sighted guides and making sure they've got orientation right. One can quickly become self-conscious of these things if they're supposed to be silent as part of the sound walk. Next up, these thoughts have embedded themselves also in some of the literature that's been produced by the National Park Service. So some of the audience here from the World Forum for Acoustic Ecology might not be aware, but the National Park Service here in the United States actually has quite a bit of literature both aimed at young visitors, but also aimed at interpretive guides inside the park, which have a number of activities. And this one that I have here on the screen comes from the Junior Ranger Sound Explorer Guide, which is aimed at young visitors, which instructs them to sit quietly. In a box below, go ahead and X marks where you're sitting, and then we want you to draw sounds that you hear and mark any location compared to where you are sitting, using words, use words or draw a picture to show what made that sound. And again, looking at it through an accessible lens, this can be problematic, basically. If you're assuming someone has visual capacity to make notes on the page through this activity. This next example that I have on the screen here comes from The Power of Sound, which is a guidebook that is given to interpreters in the parks, asking them, providing them with ways to think about. Sorry, the layers of Zoom are making it hard for me to adapt here. There we are. Okay. Which encourages a silent hike or a silent sit, basically. And if I read a part of it here, conduct all or part of a hike with no talking. Give each participant an opportunity to point out or something they find interesting or fascinating to the group, again, without talking. Instruct them to raise their hand when they see something that they want to share. Let them be creative in how they show others what they found. For example, gently poke a mushroom that is filled with spores so that they can watch the brown smoke billow out. Or they could pantomime a bird singing and point out in each other's direction. Again, there's an assumption of sight and visual capacity in this, basically. I am, in addition to my duties at Stetson University, I am co-director with Eve Pear, who many of you have met, helping one of my fellow members of the organizing committee for this wonderful conference. We are co-directors of a project called Young Sound Seekers. We organize and lead excursions to the parks for blind and partially sighted youth, ages 13 to 25. It's a rich environment for experiential learning about the natural soundscape. And our work is actually sponsored by the Natural Sounds and Night Skies Division within the Park Service. And so we receive support and mentorship and communication. By the way, I'll put in a plug for Saturday, tomorrow. Our outing excursion is actually for conference attendees here in Florida to actually go with us to one of the excursions with the Young Sound Seekers, meet some of these kids, and actually engage in activities with them as part of the excursion on Saturday, basically. So it's been a great experience to work with these kids. So on the screen previously I had a picture of myself and Eve, just kind of standing, posing for the picture, for the camera, excuse me. And next up on the screen I have a photo of us in the small auditorium here at the nearby Canaveral National Seashore, where you can see some of the kids sitting about. We have roughly between a dozen to 20 kids that show up each month, and they have a range of sightedness, but also some of them have secondary issues with mobility and speech. And so it's very important for us to consider inclusive teaching and consider universal design in creating our lesson plans each month, and sound as and allow for sound as a navigation tool while they're moving, basically. So that really, from the get-go, I wanted to kind of reconsider sound walking and design experiences that would allow for them to move freely, but then to still stop and listen and enjoy the soundscape, and structure those activities that way. Next on the screen, I have a picture of two of our students, both named Madison, sitting next to each other. We engage in a lot of field recording activities with them. They work in teams typically to collect sounds with each other in the environment. So we train them on processes like slating, processes like examining sounds, maybe activating sounds in the environment that they want to collect. And emphasizing teamwork, but teamwork with them together, basically working to collect sounds. And so we had to kind of also do a bit of investigating as far as which field recorders were the best to use with blind recordists, basically. And spoiler alert, those touch screens that provide you with endless options are actually a really bad accessibility feature. So consider that if you're working with this audience. Sometimes our students will be paired with a sighted guide, like this next picture where you have Uriel walking with me as we are out field recording. It's important to preserve that verbal communication while we're moving, and it's easier for them to enjoy the soundscape when they're still and not worried about navigating the world through sound, because sound is such a key part of their navigation strategies. And so in trying to rebuild lessons through this accessibility lens, I kind of came back to something that I had learned about for large classroom instruction, which is called think, pair, share, okay, which is what I have on the slide now. It's a way to embed small group activities in a large lecture classroom. So think of these university courses where we have 60, 80 students in it. Basically, you can kind of create little small groups, have them discuss a question, and then kind of report out, basically. I thought about how this might be a way to kind of reframe the structured listening activity and think of it instead of think, pair, share, think of it as listen, pair, share. So often what we do with young sound seekers is we will travel to a location and then we will kind of huddle up and we will do listen, pair, share, where I provide a prompt, they discuss in pairs, and then we share out from each pair what it is that we heard with regard to that prompt. And so I asked for a few volunteers. I know I captured 2 people that were going to kind of walk up here. I would love to have like 6 people come forward in the room, and let's do a kind of lightning listen, pair, share here, basically. I know I see Eve in the back. I see 3 of my students. Can I get you guys to come up here? Mary's going to come up. I need 1 more. Yes, Christine, thank you so much. So if you could kind of circle up in front of me here, and we will do a kind of listen, pair, share. And I will preface this by saying I'm trying to conform to the 15-minute structure. Go ahead and create a circle kind of in front of the podium here, basically. Yes, just kind of create a circle. Yes? Did I count right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, we have an odd number. We have 1 more.
I'll go sit down.
We can do 1? Okay, let's just, okay. So, I will be the timekeeper, okay? We've kind of traveled to this location. We can kind of stop now, and we can conduct this activity. And I'm going to give you a prompt, basically. And I will watch the time. We'll be silent for a minute. Just make sure you're comfortable and be ready for this. So my prompt is, I want you to listen for one sound inside the room that we're in. We're in this black box theater here, which is kind of shutting out the outside world. I want you to listen for one sound that's originating inside the room, and then one sound that's originating outside of the room, okay? So I'm going to watch the clock for a minute. Let's give our attention to the soundscape. Okay, bring us back to attention here. So that was 1 minute. If you'll pair up with somebody, if you don't know each other, introduce each other, and you need to make sure that both parties get a chance to talk, and I'll ask that the person with the least amount of letters in their first name talks first. So pair up with somebody, think through the number of letters in your name. Everybody pair up with one other person only. Yeah, introduce yourselves. Least number of letters in your first name talks first, but take turns talking. Just a minute. So real quick, lightning talk. Okay. And as you're wrapping up your conversations, decide who your spokesperson is going to be for the group. So one of you needs to be the spokesperson to report out on what the group talked about. Okay, you guys have conversed. You have a spokesperson? Okay. So I will just go, let's see, in terms of sharing, whose birthday is closest to today? Today is March 24th, on the calendar, basically.
Mine was just over a month ago.
Just a month ago?
Oh, so you're closer.
February 25th? Okay, so February 25th is closer, so your group is going first. So report out as far as what you talked about, sound that was inside the room and sound that was outside the room. No, yeah, just were you elected the spokesperson of your group? You were supposed to discuss, yes. Ah, okay. Yeah.
So we agreed that we heard a very similar sound in the HVAC system as the prominent sound, and it's an ongoing, repetitious sound going on with the HVAC system.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, sure, that's great, yes. For Zoom folks, come on, yes. Yes, for those who are on Zoom, they'll come forward. So spokesperson will come forward, yes.
Okay, sure, yes. Hi, this is Mary Edwards to the Zoom folks out there. Christine and I had a similar experience in listening to the HVAC system pouring through the interior of the Black Box Theater. You can elaborate on that, Christine. The external sound that I was able to ascertain, I heard some kind of automation sound, and I was able to ascertain that it was on the ground, that it perhaps was a car whizzing by.
Okay. So next group? Oh, yeah, so you only have one spokesperson per group.
Oh, there's
Yes.
so much I wanted to say.
Come on, whoever your spokesperson is can, or actually, there.
Hi, my name is Mari and this is Jay. We're both Dr. Wolek's students. So we heard, Jay heard the AC and the speakers in here. While outside, I heard mostly like people lightly talking. What I heard was people shuffling in the audience. I heard somebody snap, question mark, chairs moving. And outside, I lightly heard what I thought was a plane.
Good, all right, thank you. Next.
Thank you. Oh,
Spokesperson?
sorry.
Yeah.
Hello, I am Sebastian. I am also one of Dr. Wolek's students. Jacek and I heard two different sounds when we were in here. He actually heard someone breathing, which was very impressive. I heard someone wrestling with one of the chairs, and then we agreed kind of the inverse of what you two had talked about with the car. We thought we heard a plane outside, so we ascertained it was in the air as opposed to the ground.
Cool, thank you very much. Nice to give our volunteers a round of applause. So we may have a seat back there. Yeah, so this was kind of a rushed listen, pair, share, basically. But you can imagine this taking a little more time, having a little bit more of discussion. The leader embellishing on certain points, commenting, reinforcing ideas, clarifying things that have maybe been heard or misheard, and then taking a moment at the end to kind of summarize the major points, basically. If you're interested either in the room or in Zoom land, I'm putting my email address here on the screen, nwolek@stetson, STETSON.edu. So nwolek@stetson.edu. If you send me an email, I can send you a fuller lesson plan, basically, which I will adapt and get into the proceedings, but I have it ready to send to anybody that's interested in the lesson plan as well. So just a couple questions for the audience as I go to my closing slide here. So how many of you in did you find this useful to kind of get the conversation rolling? in each of the groups, yes. The thing I like about it is that because they're pairs, you don't have to worry about like who's gonna, it kind of forces you to get started, basically. And then I like having the prompts, basically, so that we kind of break out of the cycle of like the extroverts being always the first one to speak, basically. So that's why I like to have these kind of, they're kind of quirky, random prompts of like who has the most letters in their first name, who has the biggest shoe size, who has the most things in their pocket, those sorts of things that they can't kind of pre-control, basically. How many of you would see this working with your own students? Thank you very much. Okay. And how many of you plan to use this in the future, maybe? All right, thank you. Okay. So I just hope I encourage you to think about universal design and in your lesson plans, in the activities that you do with your students. And then I do think that we need, we've seen a little bit here of a kind of renaissance of thinking about scholarship of teaching and learning. And I'm serious about, like, if people want to talk to me about potentially gathering some of these lessons, that would be, I think, a good publication effort for this audience and this community to engage with. Again, a plug for Saturday, those of you that are here on campus, to please come out to Young Sound Seekers and enjoy working with some of these kids. They are great people. I enjoy every time we get out with them, and I'm sure I'm out of time, basically, but I'll be around during lunch to answer questions. So thank you very much.